So Mr. Bailey says, on whatever you're in on next, I want to be your investor. What, and you and your buddies, what are the next businesses that you and your buddies start? Do you start these while you're still in college? I assume?
Yeah, so we started the first company, the web hosting company, while we were in college, and we still had a full year. I still had a full year of school left, and so it was a crazy start. I mean, I got married. I started a business. I had one more year of school left. I was the president of what's called a business gaming team at SNU. That's is a big deal because we had won the national competition 3 years in a row, and now I was the president of it, and we're like going for a four-peat.
Yeah.
So there's like all this pressure that we needed to win again. That took a ton of time. So I had all these, like, basically a recipe for disaster of like, don't do all these things at once. So I would basically not sleep. I'd sleep maybe 2 or 3 hours at most in a given night. The weekends were the only time that I might find a little bit of rest, and that was just what life was like. Work, you go to school full time. I think I was doing 18 or 20 hours. So it was a full load plus the job, but it was awesome. And we started at the very beginning before we could get an office set up and we could get, a lease done and servers, because there's a bit of time to ramp up and we didn't want to wait. So we found some ways to go and get started while we're in our dorm room. We found an empty dorm room, asked the resident advisor if we could use that dorm room as our office. And they were like, as long as you don't get me in trouble, sure. And we used the phone line in that dorm room as our office phone.
Yeah.
And we literally leaned out the window with an answering machine because we didn't want it sounding like you're inside of a dorm room recording an answering machine message. And we would just basically make it sound like we were always busy on the other line. And the truth was, no one's ever in that dorm. We just would go up and check. We just go check the answering machine to see what calls came in. Our first customer was from Germany. I'll never forget being there in the dorm watching a fax come through on the computer from a contract from Germany for our first client. And then we grew to have customers in 33 countries over the next year and a half.
Wow.
We had no idea what we were doing. We were 19 or 20-year-old college kids, and we're having to provide tech support to Japan, which is in the middle of the night, our time. Just everything about it made no sense whatsoever as far as like the most unlikely, group of people to be successful at doing it. But it was one of those things of the timing and what was happening. We were one of probably only 20 companies that were focused on web hosting in the entire world. And that's not like sort of an exaggeration. Like at that time, people that said, I'm a web hosting company, not like it's like sort of a side business for us. We could only find 20. And back then you could pretty well find everything because the internet was pretty small.
Yeah.
And so we just were at a really early stage, and it turned out to be a great thing. It wasn't like as big of a home run for the investors and us as it would have been if we had waited to sell it maybe a year.
Oh,
it
really?
would have maybe been worth almost 20 times as much a year later because we had sold it like a regular business instead of like the .com craziness that happened. But the second company I started with a different partner after we sold that, and we acquired the largest professional wrestling website and grew it. Sold it to a company that Goldman Sachs took public in December of 1999. And so that particular venture was definitely more in line with the types of deals that you saw happening during that time frame. Yeah,
so you learned a lot from that first business.
Sure, we made so many mistakes. I mean, we had probably not a great structure. We didn't have a great structure to how we organized it. I just grabbed as many partners and friends as we could to start it. It really, you just learn a lot about, there's so many mistakes that were made. It's kind of embarrassing that we even survived.
Does kind of the same group of friends go into the next business or not?
No.
They just moved on?
We had some stayed with the company that we sold it to. Some before we even had sold it had already graduated and started to move on with grad school or some different directions that they went in life. So no, the second business I actually started with one of my customers from the first business, and he became the partner in the second one. But it was the same investors plus additional investors. So the investors followed us into the next thing, but the team looked a little different. Mainly because of stage of life, people getting married. There's just a lot of people going different directions.
Yeah,